Good morning. Today is Chet Adar. It's not Chet Adar, it's Tet Adar. It's Chet Adar. Chet Adar. The 8th day of Adar, and I think it's the 1st of March. Okay, and we're continuing with our mimer, with our essay on why Amalek needs to be eradicated. Exactly what does Amalek represent in our psychological makeup. And we're on page 86 on top. וזהו שאמור רז"ל על עמלק, יודע את ריבונו ומכוון למרוד בו. So what did we say before? We said that you need da'at, the da'at המתפשט, or da'at המקשר, this da'at that extends from the intellect down into the heart to complete the 6-stage cycle, or not cycle, but process. And if you don't have the da'at, the da'at is always a connection. If you don't have this connection, then you can think many good things, but you can never bring them down into your heart, and they can never translate into action. So this is what the sages meant when they said that he knows, Amalek knows his master, and he on purpose rebels against him. So this two-part statement, that he knows his master. What does it mean he knows his master? So there is knowledge there, and yet he rebels against him. So there's knowledge, which means that there's one type of knowledge, but there's not the other type of knowledge. The first type of knowledge, we said, first type of da'at, of consciousness, is what connects chokhmah and bina, what connects wisdom and understanding. The second type, we said, is what brings it down into the heart. מלחמת עמלק היה מיד אחר יציאת מצרים, שראה את האותות והמופתים ליציאת מצרים בקריעת ים סוף, שהוא עניין גילוי אלוקות. ומכל מקום לא נתפעל מזה כלל, ויצא להילחם עם ישראל. So what did he see? He saw exactly the wisdom and the understanding. He saw the Jewish people coming out of Egypt, and he saw the splitting of the sea. All these are what? Gilui elokut. They're the revelation of godliness. But as you notice, that before the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, this revelation remains without action. It's just a revelation. Here's Hashem. Now you see that that's like in the person's mind, in our psychology, our ability to understand some topic in Torah or some issue that we've learned and we understand it. We see it, but it's only a revelation of what the essence of that issue is. It's what the mind can contain. That's all it is. And he was not affected by this. He saw this. It says he saw it. That's what he saw. That's what it means that yodea et kono, that he knows his master. He saw what his master did. His master, what God took the Jewish people out of Egypt, and he split the sea. And he was not impressed by it. And he goes out to fight, to battle against Israel. וזהו אף שיודע את ריבונו שראה גילוי אלוקות ומכוון למרוד. ולא כמו שערי האומות שנתבטלו, כמו שכתוב, שמעו עמים הרגזו נחיל אחז. So he's not like all the other nations who, when they saw this great revelation of godliness, they nullified. They stood in awe of it and said there's something going on in the world. He said no. He's not impressed. Again, it's a person who sits in a shir with the greatest teacher, and everybody else in the class is taken by it and says, wow, I wish I could live up to those ideals that I've just heard. And he says, no, those ideals are meaningless. They don't mean anything. They're nothing. I don't care. ובעבודה הוא אף שמתבונן בשכלו בגדולת אור אינסוף ויודע שהאור אלוקי הוא העיקר החיות המחיה את העולם, ובלעדו אין שום קיום במציאות. מכל מקום לא יתפעל מזה מרום עליות אהבת השם ופחד השם בליבו. And in avoda, meaning in our personal service of God, in our psychology, what this means is that the person has an awareness, he's contemplated, and he comes to a recognition that the light of the infinite is what he should aspire to. It's what gives life. It's the source of all my life. It's the source of the life of all the world. And without it, there is no existence. There's nothing. And still, the individual, even though he has seen this, he understands it, He's not impressed by it at all. It leaves no impression. It does not transform into love of God and fear of God in his heart. And he does masher libo chafetz hu bebchinat chutzpah ve'gesut shel lemala mitam v'dat. And then that he continues to act the way he wants to, obstinately, and in complete rebellion to what his mind has already ascertained is true. That is what we mean by the chutzpah of Amalek, which is above reason. That's what we mean, that he makes you cold, unable to be impressed by anything at all. Again, by any kind of intellectual insight into the truth of the world. And he can't even say that he does it because he seeks something else, that he has another character trait that he prefers. He doesn't prefer anything. He's the cold-minded intellectual. Right? In the time of the Rebbe Rashav, this was becoming a norm in the world. That there were these cold intellectual types who study, who contemplate, who can even say great things about what they read in the Zohar. But when it comes to their personal conduct, the way they lead their lives, this is not relevant. This is just something to be studied. So in the Rebbe Rashab's time, this became a big issue. This was the advent of what we call, I just read an article, finished reading it now, about what should classical Jewish education be about. Unbelievable. You read this article, these are people, most of them actually have kippot on their heads. And they're afraid to say the simple idea is that classical education is not education. Why? Because it does not lead to action. It doesn't matter what you teach people in school. Teach them whatever you want. If you don't translate it into action, if it doesn't turn into love of God, fear of God, action, the way I treat the other people, the way I conduct myself, what does it matter what you taught them? You've severed, you're Amalek yourself. You've severed the mind from the heart. You've done nothing. What do you expect that it's like there's this fear. You can't say that the most important thing to learn in the end is how does this all translate into action? What do you do? If it doesn't translate into Shulchan Aruch, okay, you don't agree with the Shulchan Aruch. Write your own Shulchan Aruch. But translate it into action what you just learned. You're saying there's parts missing from the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, I agree. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't deal with idchot tzibur, as we call them, the way that the community needs to act. It touches upon it in certain areas. We have to glean it from all kinds of glosses after the fact. Okay, so write something else. But tell me, if you can't say that this needs to lead to action, you're just like Amalek. You're coldly intellectual.
Where are these people in America?
Yeah, it's called the Tikva Foundation. So I just read this article that they want to renew classical Jewish education. It doesn't. You can argue about the details. It doesn't matter. It includes this book, doesn't include that book. It doesn't matter. The ikar is missing from what they wrote. And you read it and you say, what? Nothing has changed? You don't realize that all of this nonsense in the end that's going on in the world is because it doesn't come down to action? Because you have this Judaism which is so beautifully intellectual and you have all these wonderful words to say, and in the end the person doesn't come to minyan in the morning. So what are you doing? In the end, the child doesn't respect his parents. So what are you doing? What are you building in him? A lot of facts, a lot of memorization, beautiful poetry. What's going on? It's utter nonsense, and they don't understand the simple thing. There is no Yiddishkeit without action. It doesn't mean anything. Oh, it's a beautiful. Okay, you can study Sanskrit just as much. It's just as beautiful a language. Well, study study whatever you want. ולא שכוונתו להנאת עצמו כמו הזין מידות רעות המתגברים חס וחלילה ובכדי למלא תאוות נפשו, כנ"ל מה שאין כאן קליפות עמלק, כוונתו לעקור את הכל על ידי שמקרר. The 7 Canaanite nations, what they represent is that I have an animal soul. My animal soul wants to graze, wants to eat, wants to drink, wants to do this, wants to do that, wants to have all these pleasures. So I'm drawn after that. I have a different thing to do today. I understand that it's true what I learned in school, but I have something else to do. No, he's not like that. he's a very nice person. he doesn't even follow his heart. He just says, whatever my mind understood, whatever revelation of godliness I had while I learned is not relevant to the rest of my life. It's not going to come down and create love and fear of God. וזה גרע יותר מהשבע מידות רעות. ושבע מידות רעות נתבהר לעיל שעל ידי שמאיר בחינת המוחין הרי הוא מהפך את המידות. Because there we said that over time, if all you're doing is following your animal soul because you have cravings, over time the intellect will give birth to new character inside. Because you're not opposing the intellect. You're not saying the intellect is not relevant. You're just saying it's very relevant, but right now I want to do whatever, satisfy my own cravings. So it says over time it weakens them. They're weakened in a sense. It would be like saying that Hashem said to us, you should conquer them very slowly, like the seven Canaanite nations, which are the seven character traits of the animal soul. So it take a long time. It can take a long time, and maybe you don't wage war with them, but just by living there, just by living in the land, they slowly disappear, because they're churned into Jews. They convert slowly. They all became Jewish at some point. מה שאין כן קליפות עמלק, הרי הוא יודע הכל. He acknowledges all this wisdom. He acknowledges all this understanding. He acknowledges the truth. He just says it's not relevant. They don't acknowledge it. Meaning they don't take it to heart. But it's there, they see it, they're not against it. But Amalek says, I acknowledge it, and it's simply not relevant. That's like university setting. That's exactly like a university setting. This is classical education that they're talking about. This is what the coldness means, that it cuts off the brain from the heart. וזהו שהוא מפריד בין המוחין למידות, שאינו מניח את ההתבוננות שבמוח שממשך לידי מידה בלב. וממילא כשאין המוחין מהירים במידות, הרי מתגברים השבע מידות רעות שהשתקע בתאוותו ותענוגי העולם הזה, כמו שאנו רואים שאף שאין כוונתו לענות עצמו, מכל מקום סוף כל סוף נופל במידות רעות, רחמנא ליצלן. So the fact that you sever the intellect from the emotions, it has no influence at all, and over time the character traits of the animal soul just become stronger and stronger, until eventually he's completely cut off. וזהו שנקרא ראשית גויים, שהוא הראשית ומקור לכל השבע מידות, שעל ידי שמפריד בינו מניח את המוח להעיר בלב, על ידי זה נופל במידות רעות, רחמנא ליצלן. It says that's why they're called, Amalek is called the first of all nations. Why? Because it is the source, it's the root from which all the character traits of the animal soul derive their separation from holiness by severing the mind from the heart. ויש לומר דזהו מה שפרש רש"י אשר קרחה שהקרא אותך בפני אחרים. Now he goes into another issue. This is also what it means. Rashi says that he made you cold before others, which really means there that he made others look at what happened to you and say it was coincidence. Other nations that looked at you and they said, this happens from time to time. This happens because nations come out of nations, right? שהיו האומות יראים ממך, בא זה ויקרא אותך, והיינו כנ"ל, על ידי קליפת עמלק יכולים אחר כך לשלוט השבע אומות. And so this represents that through the klipa of Amalek, by waging the war against the Jewish people after they came out of the Red Sea, so he's able to make the other character traits, the other nations, feel that they are autonomous. They have no connection to Israel. They have no dependency on us. Now again, the fact that he's transmuting this whole story of Amalek and the seven nations, seven Canaanite nations, is a very important sublimation of everything that the Torah is saying. Because there are no more seven nations today. They don't exist. Amalek does not exist. So what do we have? So you could say, oh, the Torah is irrelevant now. So people invent all kinds of strange scenarios where somebody would come and say, I'm an Amalekite. It's absolute nonsense. You can never prove it. It means nothing. There's no meaning to it. So what the Torah was talking only about a political situation, a demographic situation that existed 2,500 years ago, and that's it. That part of the Torah is not relevant. He says, no, of course it's relevant. Because whatever was done with the 7 nations and with Amalek was done. But that's over, it's finished. How is the Torah still true? How is the Torah still relevant? Because it transmutes, it becomes, it sublimates into action inside of every person. This whole story is universal. It's very important to understand that this is what Chasidus does. There are parts of the Torah that theoretically have no connection anymore to reality. But they do. And we will resume tomorrow.